so this is just a continuation of integer exponents. I'm going to talk about negative exponents, and I'm going to talk about zero exponents. And then I'm actually going to do a couple of problems from your practice worksheet today, so you can kind of follow along with those as you work on the practice. All right, so negative exponents I talked a little bit about in class today on Monday, so it's Monday night. Hopefully now you're watching this in class on Tuesday because you should be, and I asked you to. All right, a negative exponent is when you have something like x to the negative a. The negative exponent, it's kind of like the idea with like scientific notation is that it should make the number smaller, and the way that you make this smaller is by moving it to the correct location. So right now, technically, it's in the numerator or the top of a fraction. Because it's negative, you're going to move it to the downstairs into the denominator, and then it's going to become a positive exponent. If there isn't a number on the bottom, then you need to put in a placeholder for the top because you need to indicate that there's still a numerator, and now this x to the a is in the bottom. The reverse happens if it's downstairs or in the denominator and it's negative. If it's in the denominator and it's negative, then you need to go ahead and you need to move it to the upstairs. I think of it almost as if you have somebody living in two apartments. This person is living upstairs and hates it. They'd like to live in a basement. So once they move to the basement, they're happy. This person is stuck in the basement and they're unhappy. Then they get to move upstairs and they're happy again. All right. As soon as you move it, the exponent changes sign. It doesn't change the sign of the coefficient. So for example, if I have something like negative 5x to the negative third, that negative 5 isn't going to go anywhere. It's going to stay upstairs because its exponent is technically a positive 1. If I can get my marker to write, that would be helpful. So that negative 5 stays in the upstairs apartment, and then this x, who's a creeper and doesn't like living upstairs, is going to move into the basement and become happy. All right? Zero exponent is a pretty basic rule. The zero exponent says anything except for 0 to 0 is 1. This, like I said, it only doesn't work for 0. I've never seen anyone try to take 0 to the 0 power. You can ask Siri to do it for you if you want. She will not recommend it. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to erase these couple of small rules, and I'm going to do a couple of examples off of the worksheet for today. This is not the worksheet for today. Sorry. This is the worksheet for today. I have so many worksheets. So many worksheets, so little time. All right, so this is your integer exponent review. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to look at problem 2 with you. This is similar to what we did in class on Monday. Then I'm going to do one or two of the dividing ones at the bottom that involve powers and dividing. So here we're going to combine like terms. I don't have highlighter to do this with, so I'm just going to use different colored markers. I have a whole number 3, a whole number 3, and a whole number 4. So those three are going to multiply together. Then I have a b. It doesn't have a power. Be careful. The squared is on the a only, so this b is really to the first power. Then I have a b to the second power, and then I have another b to the first power. Okay. Then I have an a squared, and an a to the fourth. You don't have to write those steps out. Remember I talked about that today in class or yesterday in class, whenever you're watching this. All right, you don't have to write this step out if you don't want to. If you feel like you're pretty confident with multiplying with integer properties, then you can just go ahead and go pretty much straight from here to your final answer. I'm tired, so if I get this wrong, please forgive me. 3 times 3 is 9, times 4 should be 36, according to my calculations. B to the first times b to the second times b to the first will be b to the 1 plus 2 plus 1, which is 4. A to the second, and a to the fourth should be a to the 2 plus 2 plus 4, which is a to the 8. Now, you can leave it like that. However, best practices is to put it in alphabetical order. So you should really get 36, a to the 8th, b to the 4th. So it's not wrong to write it like this, but it's a better practice to have it in A, B, C, D, E, F order. All right, so that's problem number 2 on your review worksheet. Now I'm going to look at problem, I don't know, I'll look at problem number 6 because it looks kind of disgusting and it looks kind of to be one of the bigger problems. And then, I don't know, maybe 8 or something. All right. So problem number 6 combines the power property and the quotient property and the product property. So we've talked about all 3 of those properties. If you work on this worksheet and you're not really 100% sure about all of it, don't panic. All right, just do the best that you can with it. I'll be back tomorrow, Wednesday, and we can go over some problems together and practice it still. Okay, just turn in your worksheet at the end of the class period, even if you're not done, so I can see, you know, what you were good with and what you had problems with. Don't be afraid to have problems. All right, don't feel like you have to get it completely finished if you're struggling. If you are already through it and you're already bored with me, then yay, good for you. All right, and I mean that seriously. I'm just tired. So if you can do this and you don't need to follow along with these problems, then that's awesome. All right, when you have something like this, there's a general pattern that you want to follow, and I apologize for my cat. As soon as I start filming, she decides it's like cat o'clock. You generally want to handle your power property first. Then you want to handle the numerator and the denominator separately. And then you generally want to handle the quotient property. All right, that's usually the best pattern to do this with, but you can change that if you want to. All right, so here I'm going to carry this 4 in with the power property. 4, now remember, when it's a power property, this is a multiplier into your parenthesis. So I'm going to get x to the 4 times 4, which is x to the 16. Then I'm going to get y to the 2 times 4, which is y to the 8. Now, here's what I meant when I earlier said you didn't have to write this all out. You can combine this, and I think most of you, especially once you practice this a little bit, will be fine with combining and not feel like you need to kind of do the middle steps. But you can always do middle steps if you need to. When I was in Algebra 2, one of the biggest struggles that I had was had people skipping steps and me not understanding why they did it. So feel free not to skip anything. 2 doesn't have anything to multiply by. Oh, hello. 2 has 2 to multiply by, so 2 times 2 is 4. Now I've got x to the 4th and x to the 4th. Those are going to add together because they're multiplying, not power to power. So that gives me x to the 8th. Then I've got y squared, y to the 4th, and y to the 3rd. That gives me 3 plus 4 plus 2, which is y to the 9th. Now, here, notice I have more x's on top than I have on the bottom. So when I subtract, I'm going to have x left in the numerator or upstairs. Here, when I subtract, I have more y's on the bottom. So when I subtract, that extra y that's going to be left over will stay in the denominator. You can always expand this. You can also always think of it as a negative. So the 4 stays in the denominator. On top, I'm going to get x to the 16 minus 8, y to the 8 minus 9. That'll give me x to the 8, y to the negative 1 over 4. And if you want, because you knew that this y, there was more of it in the denominator, you could have just left it in the denominator. Or you can realize that this is a negative 1, meaning it's unhappy in the upstairs apartment. It wants to live in the basement and play Halo all night. So I'm going to move it back downstairs where it will be happy. So I'm going to get x to the 8th over 4y. You can call it y to the 1st if you want to. Y is the same thing as y to the 1st. Okay, so that's problem number 6. I'm going to, I think, maybe look at problem number 8, which is sort of similar in style, but it's got power on the top and the bottom. And then I'm going to leave the rest for you to try, right? Just do your best on them, right? I'll look at them, and then when I come back on Wednesday, we'll talk about kind of how things went and what made sense and what you still had trouble with. This one doesn't have any negatives to start with, but please know that that's kind of the next step is now zeros are going to show up, negatives are going to show up, all that sort of a thing. All right, so if you need to get this written, go ahead and pause the video, and I'm going to erase it. Sorry that my board is so dirty. I can't seem to get it clean. It is an old board. Alright, so problem number 8 says 2x to the 4th, y to the 3rd, times 2y squared to the 4th, over yx to the 4th squared. Alright, the biggest problem that I see happening in this comes from this parentheses right here, because people forget all of the time that this 2 is to the first power. So when I carry that 4 in, it's not going to be 2 times 4, it's going to be 2 to the first power, and the 4 is going to affect the 1. This is not doing anything, so I'm just going to rewrite it, 2x to the 4th, y to the 3rd. Now I'm going to carry this in. 4 times 1 is 4, so now I have 2 to the 4th. 4 times 2 is 8, so I have y to the 8th. On the bottom, this y also has a 1. People always remember it better on the powers, though, or on the variables than they do on the numbers. Now I'm going to go ahead and carry those in. Y to the 1 times 2 is y squared. X to the 4 times 2 would be x to the 8th. Now, I'm going to treat the top and the bottom separately, and then I'm going to bring them back together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with just the top. This is a 2 to the 1st, and this is a 2 to the 4th. Even though they're 2's, I'm allowed to add the exponents. So that gives me 2 to the 1 plus 4, which is 5. X doesn't have anyone to combine with on top, so it's just x to the 4th. Y has y to the 3rd and y to the 8th, which is 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay. On the bottom, I still have x to the 8th and y to the 2nd. Now, for this one, I'm going to go ahead and expand it, just so that if you ever have trouble with this, you can see how the expansion works. I'm going to leave 2 to the 5th, and I have 4 x's. Now watch this, I'm going to do 11 y's. Okay, you certainly don't have to do expansion. I only really recommend it if you hit a problem and you're having trouble figuring out what's going to reduce. You can always subtract. But I think this really helps visualize that even though I have x to the 8th and x to the 4th, there's more x's in the denominator, so that's where the leftovers will be. If I subtract 4 minus 8, it's a negative, meaning that it would be moving to the basement. Alright, so I have x to the 4th left. This x to the 4th, though, is downstairs. It doesn't matter which y's you cancel. I'm just going to cancel the ones that are kind of above each other. Then you would get... helps if I open my marker. You'll get 2 to the 5th, y to the 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, which is 11 minus 2, and then x to the 4th. Now, you can leave it like that, and that is a perfectly lovely answer. However, if you were to see this on like a standardized test or a multiple choice test, they probably wouldn't leave it like this. They would multiply 2 to the 5th out. 2 to the 5th is 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16, times 2 is 32. So you would have 32y to the 9th. You can always plug that into a calculator by multiplying 2's, or you can do 2 to the 5th power, whichever makes you happiest. Okay, so that was just kind of a quick look at the idea of negatives and zeros. We'll spend a little bit more time on that on Wednesday. You now have a worksheet that you need to finish. I did problems 2, 6, and 8, I believe. So you have 1, 3, 4, 5, 7, 9, 10, 11, and 12 to get through. All right? If you don't finish, that's okay. Turn whatever you have in at the end of the class period, and I will see you tomorrow. Later.